What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another video. We're talking about the OnePlus 9, which is their latest upper mid-range offering with a starting price point of $730. Now that price point, combined with the fact that it has a relatively solid feature set, makes it not only a really nice competitor in a really growing segment, but it's also continuing a trend of other upper mid-range phones we saw from 2020. And that's that these phones are getting really, really good, to the point where you may want to start rethinking that $1,000 flagship phone. Now, let's talk OnePlus 9. Can we just take a second to appreciate the color that this OnePlus 9 came in? I think OnePlus is calling it Winter Mist. Obviously, it's this super dope purple color, and I really wish the OnePlus 9 Pro would have came in a color like this, because I think out of all the colors that have launched so far, this Winter Mist color is without a doubt the best. And when you consider the materials that OnePlus uses, especially considering this is an upper mid-range phone, I actually really appreciate that OnePlus decided to use glass on the back of the phone. A lot of times whenever you start to get into the $600 or $700 smartphone segment, you'll kind of have a mix-up between some phones that utilize more plastic builds and other phones that utilize more glass builds, but may have some shortcomings in other places. OnePlus just decided to go with glass on this, which I can really appreciate from a build quality perspective. And the phone still feels really ergonomic in the hand because that glass is curved around the edges. So from an overall design perspective, I am loving the Winter Mist color and the choice of materials here so far. The curves on the back of the phone lead up to a totally flat 6.55-inch 1080p AMOLED display. Now, I know I mentioned that the display is 1080p, and of course, on a phone that's sitting at this price point, you're probably not going to have super high resolution Quad HD displays like you may find on this phone's bigger brother, the OnePlus 9 Pro, but I gotta hand it to him, man. The quality of this 1080p display is really nice, and that really doesn't surprise me considering I'm pretty sure OnePlus is still sourcing their displays from Samsung, and as we all know from any other smartphone Samsung has made with a 1080p resolution, the quality is still really, really nice. I mean, you really have to be kind of a pixel peeper to actually tell the difference between a phone that's running Quad HD and one of these high quality 1080p displays. So that's good to see. And in terms of refresh rate, the OnePlus 9 gets a bump from last year's OnePlus 8, and it's sticking with the 120 Hz refresh rate. So you may not get super, super high resolution, but you do get that buttery smooth 120 Hz refresh rate. And of course, you still have the optical fingerprint sensor, which is awkwardly low this year, but hey, at least it's still super fast and super accurate. Internally, the OnePlus 9 is a really solid combination of both flagship specs and upper mid-range specs that we would expect. So on the flagship side, you're looking at a Snapdragon 888 processor, which is dope. It's going to be the flagship processor for 2021, so that's awesome to see. And on the upper mid-range side of specs, you're looking at 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of base storage. Now, I don't really mind the 8 gigs of RAM. I think that's a really solid amount, even for Android phones in 2021. Where I would have liked to have seen something different is for OnePlus to up the base storage. I feel like 128 gigabytes of storage, especially if it's non-expandable, may not be that much for a lot of consumers out there, especially given that this phone comes with a relatively decent camera system that we're going to get to here in a minute. And it also has the ability to record video in 4K, which can definitely take up a lot of space if you're not utilizing cloud-based storage systems. So who knows, maybe in like a year or two, as upper mid-range phones continue to get even better, maybe we'll see a 256 gig base storage option for those of us out there who like to take up a lot of space on our phones. But either way, internally, the phone is awesome. And as far as software goes, I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about OxygenOS. We already talked about OxygenOS in a little more detail on our OnePlus 9 Pro review, which we'll leave a link to that review for you as well. Just know that in short, my feelings about OxygenOS are this. I will still take it over any other version of Android, outside of maybe what you'll still find on the Pixel, but I still feel like OnePlus has steadily grown OxygenOS to a point where it's definitely not how it used to be a couple of years ago. I don't think it's as clean. It reminds me a lot of Samsung's One UI, and Another thing to keep in mind is we're going to have to see how OnePlus deals with software updates as their product line continues to grow. Now, I actually switched to the OnePlus 9 after I reviewed the OnePlus 9 Pro, mainly because whenever a company drops their latest and greatest flagship phone, you probably want to review the most expensive one first, right? It has all the bells and whistles, all the cool stuff, blah, blah, blah. You get what I'm saying. But anyways, in our OnePlus 9 Pro review, I mentioned that the battery life was not too impressive. It's not the type of phone where you'll probably kill it in a day, but it's also not the type of phone where you can take it at least 2 days on a single charge. Surprisingly enough, my battery life experience on the OnePlus 9 has actually been better than the 9 Pro. Now, I can definitely get through 1 full day's worth of usage on the 9, and on days where maybe I'm using the phone a little less, I can push it into the following morning or the following afternoon before I have to charge it. Now, I'm sure this is due to a couple of reasons that we could look at. Number one, both phones have the same size battery, 4,500 milliamp hours, but the OnePlus 9 has a smaller and lower resolution display. So there's less pixels to push, meaning less pressure put on the battery. Now, when it comes time to charge the phone, you actually have a wireless charging option this year, which was different compared to last year's OnePlus 8. You can wirelessly charge the 9 up to 15 watts, which is nice to see. And obviously, you can charge it via a wired charging solution like the one you find in the box that can charge at 65 watts. So it's really cool to see both 65 watt wired charging and 15 watt wireless charging on the upper mid-range model. Now, let's turn the phone over and talk Hasselblad, because I'm sure you're all well aware by now, but the big story behind the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro is their partnership with the legendary camera maker Hasselblad in order to attempt to improve the smartphone camera performance. Now, what type of hardware are we dealing with this setup? We're looking at a 48 megapixel wide angle, a 50 megapixel ultra wide angle, and a 2 megapixel monochrome sensor. Now, I don't know about you, but I really don't care about a 2 megapixel monochrome sensor, so we're just going to omit that one for now. And in terms of the megapixel count, you have the same exact numbers compared to the 9 Pro. Now, obviously, you are missing the telephoto lens that the 9 Pro has, and in terms of the sensors themselves, the OnePlus 9 is rocking lesser quality sensors for both the wide and the ultra wide angle. Now, how does the camera actually perform? I found that in optimal lighting conditions, the camera actually performs really well, and it's capable of producing photos that are color accurate and have a large amount of detail to them, which I feel like image detail specifically is something that can be missing from a lot of smartphone camera systems in the $600 to $700 range. So that was really nice to see. Now, in situations where lighting may not be optimal, you may find yourself taking photos 3 or 4 times before you get a shot that you're happy with. Maybe the first shot that you take is a little out of focus, or the second shot that you take is missing some detail, or maybe it's a little grainy. And even in some certain special case shooting scenarios like super macro mode, I've noticed some distortion around the parts of the subject that the macro is trying to actually focus on. So overall, from a photography perspective, I would say if lighting is optimal, it's an incredibly capable system that can really produce some awesome results. And in terms of video, you have the option to record in 1080p, 4K, or 8K. 1080p and 4K can be recorded in 30 and 60 frames per second, and 8K can be recorded in 30 frames per second. That awesome feature of recording in 4K at 120 frames per second is exclusive to the 9 Pro, unfortunately. But either way, you have a plethora of recording options available. And like I said, in optimal lighting conditions, it's a very capable camera system. So I feel like the OnePlus 9 actually brings a surprising amount of value to the table given that $730 price point. I mean, you get a glass build, a great 1080p display with an awesome 120 Hz refresh rate. You get flagship caliber performance thanks to the Snapdragon 888 processor and 8 gigs of RAM. You get great battery life thanks to a 4,500 milliamp hour battery and the ability to charge at 65 watts with the charger that's included in the box. Thank you again, OnePlus, for that one. And you have a really solid and capable camera system. So overall, again, at $730, the OnePlus 9 checks off a lot of boxes that I feel like a lot of consumers are going to be looking for, especially in this price range. It's actually a little bit of an unexpected value whenever you think about how much this phone has improved over last year's OnePlus 8, while still remaining in what some of us feel is a relatively affordable price range. So hey, if you're in the segment for an upper mid-range Android phone and you want some of what 2021 has to offer in terms of the latest and greatest for that smartphone, I think the OnePlus 9 is a really solid option. I'm actually excited to see how other competitors in this space end up responding with their phones in 2021. Needless to say, if you guys enjoyed the review, please hit like and subscribe. As always, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. That purple is just dope.